Hi, everyone. Welcome to the book launch for The Clever Little Tailor. I'm Jordan Kutzik. I'm the publisher of Kinder-Loshn Publications, which is a project of Yugntruf Youth for Yiddish. And this is our first book, and we're extremely proud that it's out in the world and that many of you have seen it and enjoyed it, and hopefully it'll go out to many others. You'll learn a lot more about the book today, and so I'm going to talk a bit about how this all started. About 6 years ago at Yiddish Week, I tried to gather some children's books to give to Yiddish-speaking kids and their families, and we found that a lot of the books didn't really work in terms of getting kids to read on their own because they were old. Most were in black and white. The illustrations were lackluster. Spelling systems were 4 or 5 different types of spelling, depending on what you get. And I had the idea of typing up some old Yiddish books and reprinting them. And then when I began researching more, and I realized it would cost tens of thousands of dollars to make a professional book, and didn't think there'd be a market for that. A couple of months later, I was in a bookstore and I saw these beautiful bilingual books from the north of Canada in English and Inuktitut, which is the local language up there. And I thought, maybe we could do a bilingual book. So I got some friends together and said, what book should we try and do bilingually? And Samantha Zarin suggested The Clever Little Tailor. And I hadn't read The Clever Little Tailor, but so I got it online and through the Yiddish Book Center. And I was really enchanted by the mixture of humor and then kind of this kind of joy of life that didn't hide the sorrows of life either, and a mixture of kind of classical Eastern European Jewish culture and kind of an American sense of optimism alongside a very pan-European kind of mythologized world. It just had an interesting mix of things that I had seen in many other Yiddish children's books and some things I had not seen in any Yiddish children's books. So I wrote to Krista Whitney at the Yiddish Book Center. And I said, you talk to the Simon family and the Forman family, who should I get in touch with? And I was put in touch with David, and lo and behold, David was already in the middle of translating the book. In fact, was almost done translating the book. And that's kind of how this all started. And there's a lot more to the story, obviously. But one thing that made it all possible was all of you, and many others who are not here today donated a lot of money, which allowed us to move forward with this project, even though we had never done anything like this before, and I had never done anything like this before. So I'd like to briefly thank our major sponsors for this book, which are the H. John Foundation, the Marinus and Mina B. Koster Foundation, the Muriel and Joseph Basis Memorial Fund, the Aaron and Sonia Fishman Foundation for Yiddish Culture, the Newman Schechter Foundation for the Advancement of Standard Yiddish, David and Rhonda Kutzik, Daniel Rauchwerk, and Dr. Jonathan Sunshine. And since this book has come out, we've also had donations, large donations from Rebecca David and Elliot Grodko, Ted Handel in memory of Chana Yachnis, Adam Rich and the Chaim Schwartz Foundation for subsequent books. And other than the small group of people I just mentioned, we've had a total of over 150 donations to support these books from people all over the world. And I can't thank everyone enough for that. This is the first book. In April or May, we're going to have a very different book, a very short book for little kids, translated from all languages from the Faroese. That's about a puffin who learns that he's going to have an older sibling and his reaction to that. And myself and my wife, Rachel Field, translated the book into English from the Spanish version, and Arla Vishwanath of many different fames, but especially Yiddish Harry Potter fame, translated into a beautiful Yiddish version. A little later down the line, we're going to have a bilingual edition of Emil and Carl, which is Jacob Gladstein's masterwork about the Holocaust for young children for 1939, or older children, 12, 13, 14-year-old. And we're also going to have a very special book, which isn't yet on our website, but there'll be information about it shortly, which is The Big Bad Bays / The Bays of Bays, which is a children's book by Max Weinreich, translated by his son, Gabriel Weinreich, who is also the main character of the book. He translated it into English many, many years later. And the book simultaneously teaches the Yiddish alphabet and also has this kind of political allegory about show trials going on too, as well as some inside jokes about Yiddish's life and Vilna and even Yiddish spelling reforms. It's absolutely wonderful. And unlike the Clever Little Tailor, which was well known in Yiddish, it unfortunately was never well known in Yiddish for a variety of reasons. So it's kind of a real rediscovery. So I want to thank all of you for your support, your advice, your good wishes, and thanks so much for coming today. And now to tell us more about his grandfather, the author of this book, Solomon Simon, and how he became inspired to translate The Clever Little Tailor into English, here's David Forman.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Actually, what I think I'd like to do is first read from the book. And a little later on in the hour, I'll talk about Shlomo Simon, my grandfather, and about my route to translating and so on. But I think it's more fun to start right in with the book itself. Amol, mit der Sach Jahren zurück, kein Eisenbahn ist nicht gewesen. Als Menschen haben gewollt fahren von einer Stadt in der andere, seien sie gefahren, reiten dick auf Pferd oder in Foren. Als man hat gedarft über schicken Schores von einer Stadt in der andere, hat man die Schore eingepackt in Waggoner und abgeschickt in der andere Stadt. Once upon a time, a long time ago, before there were cars or railroads, when people wanted to travel from one city to another, they rode on horses or traveled by wagon. And as an aside, right there in the first sentence, I've already changed something that Solomon Simon did. In the Yiddish, kein Eisenbahn ist nicht gewesen, there were no railroads. I'm not sure how much that resonates with a child of 2021. There's no railroads, so you can't go from one city to another. So I had to put in before there were cars and railroads, just so that little bit would make sense. Okay, so there were no cars, no railroads. We got to go by wagon. If goods were sent from one city to another, they had to be loaded onto horse-drawn wagons and driven there. In those days, there was a merchant by the name of Yisroel Fried. He was rich and had large businesses. His base was in the city of Leshna in Poland, and he used to ship his goods from there to all the smaller towns and villages. In that same city of Leshna, near the synagogue where poor people prayed, there lived a poor tailor named Beryl Lepidis. No one called him by that name. Everyone called him Schneiderl, which means little tailor. He was short, thin, and dark. He had black hair, black eyes, black eyebrows, and a pointy black beard. Schneiderl was poor but happy man, lively, playful, always ready with a song or a joke. He lived in a small house with 4 children. The children went around in rags and tatters, and very often there was no food in the house. Yeah, so we have a tailor whose children are poorly clothed. My grandfather himself, when he was growing up in Belarus, they were so poor that even though his father was a shoemaker or bootmaker, there were times when there were not enough shoes for each of the kids to have their own pair of shoes to walk to school in. One summer, I skipped a little, a robber named Hargim stationed himself on the road that led from Leshna out to the smaller towns. Again and again, the bandit attacked the merchant's wagons, killed his drivers, and made off with the goods. The rich man tried hiring stronger, hardier coachmen, but it did not help at all. The bandit was too powerful. Things went on this way for months. More drivers were killed, and no one wanted to drive the merchant's wagons anymore. He thought and he thought, but did not know what to do. One day, as he sat thinking in his office, the little tailor came in and said, "Good morning to you, Mr. Fried. I'll drive one of your wagons if you like. You know who I am, of course." Fried the merchant said to the tailor, "Of course I know you. You live on Synagogue Street. Who doesn't know Schneiderl? But you should know that what you are suggesting smacks of death. Think long and hard about it. You have 4 children. Haven't you heard 6 of my coachmen were murdered on the road where I ship my merchandise?" "I've heard," said Schneiderl. "So then why are you putting your life on the line?" he asked. "I have nothing to lose," said Schneiderl. "If I can't find work, I'll die of hunger anyway. I will take the risk, become a driver, and hope to make it through the woods safely." But Schneiderl puts a couple of conditions on there. He says, "I'll drive for you, but you have to pack the wagon the way I tell you." Yeah? "First," says Schneiderl, "load the wagon full of goods. Pack it so full that no matter how hard the horses are whipped, they will not be able to run. Then tie up and lace the merchandise not with string, but with strong, thick wire. And finally, give me a stick, a short one, but good and thick. Let me know when you have everything ready." So the clever little tailor rides off into the woods where the murderous highwayman is hanging out. They meet. He readily gives the bandit his wagon. And when Hargim, the robber, gets onto the wagon, he's a big, heavy, strong guy, and he whips the horses to try to get them to run, and they don't go anywhere. Yeah. And meanwhile, Schneiderl has taken his stick and put it in the spokes of the back wheels and snuck off, right? So the bandit is not able to take the horse and wagon. Second time around, Schneiderl is going back into the same woods with the same murderer in them. And the merchant says, "How do you want us to load the wagon this time? The same way as last time?" And Schneiderl says, "No." "Why not? You pulled off a good trick." "Yes, in fact, that's true, but the same trick won't work twice." "How do you want it loaded?" "Lightly," says Schneiderl, "very lightly. And this time, use ordinary rope." So off Schneiderl goes again on his wagon into the woods, singing loudly so the robber will find him. "Räuber von Räuberland, komm her zu mir, seh die volle Kastens, schreures onashir." He sings loudly, but no one answers. And then finally, the familiar voice of the robber. "Are you looking for the robber? Here I am. Climb down from the wagon so I can murder you and take all your goods." "Oh, robber, good day to you," answered Schneiderl. "How are you doing? Don't you recognize me?" "I'm Schneiderl." "That's not so nice. I've been looking for you all day and you haven't answered. What took you so long?" "Ah, Schneiderl," answered the robber. "I didn't recognize you. Good, climb on down. This time I will take the goods. I brought shears that can cut through wire." "There was no need to trouble yourself, dear robber." "No need at all," says Schneiderl. "I purposely brought a half-empty wagon so you could get away more easily." "Excellent, Schneiderl," answers the robber. "You're a good fellow. You know, I really like you." The second trick succeeds. I forgot to mention before, there are all these sub-headlines like in the old days. introducing the new sections of the chapter. So here's the second trick. So saying, the robber climbs up, sets himself on top of the wagon, and is about to make his getaway when Schneiderl called out, "What's your hurry? The night is young. Climb down and we'll make a fire together and warm ourselves." "You're right," answered the robber. Together they made a fire and they sat down beside it. "You look like you're really strong," said the little tailor to the robber. "Yes, I'm really strong," the bandit said. "Do you see that young birch tree? I can bend it with my bare hands so the top touches the ground." "That I would like to see," answered Schneiderl, his eyes sparkling with joy. The bandit threw off his coat and hat, and in 2 seconds he had bent down the tree. "Keep holding it a little longer. Just hold it a little while longer," said Schneiderl. "I can keep holding it as long as you want," bragged the bandit. Schneiderl went up to the robber from behind and tied the top of the tree to his hair. "Now let go," he called out. The bandit let go of the tree, and wham! The tree lifted him up by the hair, leaving him hanging in the air. Schneiderl quickly hauled himself onto the wagon, and giddy-ap, he escaped. Once in town, he delivered the goods and returned home the same day. The merchant met him with great delight. Well, after Schneiderl finally defeats the robber, he then is confronted with a band of robbers. And after he defeats the band of robbers, and everyone is now no longer calling him Schneiderl, but Das kluge Schneiderl, the clever little tailor, a king summons him, and he has to do battle with giants. So each time his success is rewarded by further challenge. Each time he sets out, he asks for some confusing little thing, and we have to wonder, we know he's going to win, but how can he use a brand new pair of shoes and some whiskey to defeat a band of robbers? Or in the case of the giants, Schneiderl asks for a silk banner. Schneiderl killed 40 in a single blow. And some cheese balls called gommelkes and a live bird. And we have to wonder, how can he defeat the giants with those things? But stay tuned for that for later, because next we have a video of Yehuda Bloom, the illustrator of The Clever Little Tailor. I have to tell you, every one of my friends who has gotten this book, the first thing they have said to me is not, "Oh, this is fascinating looking, I can't wait to read it." No, they've all said, "It's beautiful." First words out of everyone I know's mouth, and a great deal of that credit goes to Yehuda Bloom. So we're going to show a video in which he not only talks about the process of defining and refining his artwork, but also really beautifully, in just a few well-chosen words, tells us why Schneiderl is a hero with really timeless appeal. So here is the video of Yehuda Bloom.
I'm Yehuda Bloom. I live in Crown Heights. I do freelance illustration. I've been working on Kinder-Loshn with Jordan for pretty much since the beginning. Jordan asked me to help out with the first book, Das kluge Schneiderl, which is the story of a clever tailor who, through his ingenuity, is able to outmaneuver villains in a sort of collection of folktales that are strung together around this main character. So when I was reading it, I noticed that there were the sort of moralistic bents to it, like good and evil, that I thought could be represented visually in the pictures, symbolically, with Schneiderl as a sort of virtuous, intelligent figure that does good in the world, and he has a good heart, and he's able to figure out things and solve problems for people, and he has a sort of a charitable and kind soul. You could see, like in the cover image, it's sort of split down the middle. There's Schneiderl on the right side, sort of bathed in light and color, singing. He has this sort of natural control, I think, over himself and nature and his mind. He also has a joy, this character, a joy of being in the world, I think, which you see in the way that he sings and delights in things throughout the story. Like each individual illustration is sort of a world unto itself. I think the illustration that's probably draws the most from references is chapter 8 in the Tudor Palace. I put it specifically in Henry VIII's Hampton Court, and I put the tapestries that are on the wall there, and I tried to make it feel like a complete Tudor scene. With the letters, I wanted to show a moment from the story, like an illustration, but also have it read as a letter. So for example, the Aleph, which shows a prisoner whose hands are chained. I fit each hand into one of the segments of the Aleph on the top left and the bottom right. And then in the slash going across, I put the body of the prisoner and forming the tip of the Aleph, the spear of the guard. So it took a lot of repositioning and trying out different arrangements, a lot of sketches in the beginning, and I would try to find like what is the best combination of like something that will sort of complement and highlight the shape of the letter, but is also like an important moment in the chapter that follows, or at least an evocative image from it. In all of the illustrations, I tried to find like an emotional connection or something that interested me about the scene, so that anybody looking at any of the illustrations could find something resonant in it, could glean something about the characters. I liked the opportunity to work on a kid's book. The story it's rough at times, and I mean it could be enjoyed by any age, I think, and it deals with themes that are relevant to everybody. Something that motivated me at times was memories of how I enjoyed illustrations in books. When I was younger, especially, it would be like almost something that would make me want to read a book when I was little. And so I knew I had that pressure for like younger audiences. The sort of transportational power of an image for a child can carry a lot of significance. I love the idea of the project to sort of produce a new crop of published material for young readers in Yiddish. My grandparents spoke Yiddish, I speak Yiddish, and it's an important language to me, as well as one that I feel is so rich and full of possibilities for people to explore. I mean, the literature is immense. And with this project, we're making new some of the texts that someone might see as something of the past. Is like, if it comes out in a new edition, then maybe its relevance will be restated. It has a different quality to it, the sound of it, the feel of it on the page. It has an expressive quality different than English, which I think these books can convey.
I like that video. Thanks so much. And thanks so much to Yehuda for all your work as well. Yes, we would love for you to buy this book. You can order it at www.yiddishchildrensbooks.com or at Kinder-Loshn.org. There you could also make a donation to Kinder-Loshn if you want to this press, which will continue, as Jordan said, to put out bilingual books over the coming year and years. Yes, please feel free to head over there. It's interesting how long an hour seems until you plan it out, and then how little time I actually have to tell you about Shlomo Simon, about my relationship with him, about my coming to Yiddish, and about the book, and about my translation of the book. So really only tidbits of each of these. You can actually find out a little more about me if you want to, or contact me through my own website, which is davidrforman.com. Shlomo Simon was born in 1895 in Kalenkovich, a railroad town in, so not a tiny, we think of shtetl as a little village, no, in a solid town in what's now Belarus, what was then part of the Russian Empire. He was the sixth, I think, of 8 children, sickly, didn't walk for several years. So he spent his early years, according to his autobiography, more or less on the floor of the house near the oven where his mother was a baker. His father was a shoemaker, as I already mentioned, or bootmaker. And he was also, so he, you know, partly from just not going anywhere, he developed a rich imagination. But he was also clearly smart. He had an amazing memory, and in fact, ended up being the only one of the 8 children in his family to attend yeshiva. So when he did finally go to school, he excelled quite obviously and quite immediately. He came to the United States to avoid serving in the Tsar's army, and then ended up serving in the United States Army at the very tail end of World War I. He went to dental school, and in 1924 became a dentist. And worked full-time, amazingly, over the next 40 years, and yet wrote 20 Yiddish books in his lifetime, and a few in English for good measure toward the very end of his life. I've never been able to understand how someone could have a full-time job, write at night, and have that kind of output. But that wasn't all that he did. He also wrote articles for every newspaper and journal. He wrote, and he was an administrator in the Yiddish schools. He taught a Tanakh study group for adults. So he was obviously a very committed and very energetic man. But what he was best known for was his children's books. Shmer al Nar was the first, The Clever Little Tailor, the second of them. He also wrote Robert's Venturas, the Wise Men of Chalm in English, Die Helden von Chalm. I keep getting that confused with Chalamer Chachamim, another version of those stories. And then finally, Chachamim, Akshanim, Unaronim, which I render in English as Wise Men, Fools, and Stubborn Mules. He had a real storyteller's gift of keeping a story going and keeping the audience interested. So, for example, with the Chelm stories, most of those were originally really like one-liners, and yet he created a sort of novelistic feel, a whole town full of characters who he sketched out in just a sort of few descriptive strokes. In The Clever Little Tailor and in The Wandering Beggar, the stories begin as universal folk stories, as you heard. The story of this clever little guy who overcomes much bigger opponents or enemies through his wits is pretty well universal. But he put his own flavor on it. Also, the stories became more and more Yiddishlech as they went on. So it's a matter of timing how much I can read from here. He solves a murder mystery in chapter 5. In chapter 6, he serves as an honorary judge in the city of Leipzig. And toward the end of the book, he encounters an evil archbishop who makes life miserable for the Jews of England. And the prince there's a sort of good prince who's been fallen out of the king's favor because this archbishop doesn't like him. And so the prince brings him to England to try to discredit this evil archbishop, and in so doing, of course, makes life easier for the Jews. I think I'll read you just a little bit from that chapter. So we're going to skip, if you have the book, all the way to page 161. For those who don't, like I said, please feel free to come to go get one. It's 2 weeks to Hanukkah, amazingly enough. It still hasn't really frozen hard or snowed here in Ithaca, New York yet, and yet Hanukkah is only 2 weeks away. Okay. Prince Tudor and his companions arrived at his father's palace, where they were greeted with joy. A son is a son, not a favorite son perhaps, but still one's own flesh and blood. So they celebrated. The queen hugged and kissed Prince Tudor. The king stood there, happy and content. Now and then people came up to greet the prince. Schneiderl stood off to one side, smoking his pipe, and was pleased. So much fondness all around. It was good to see. More hugging and kissing. Then King Edward gestured toward Schneiderl. Who's this? A Jew, answered the prince. You actually brought a Jew with you, son? You do know, don't you, that Archbishop Narcissus has forbidden all Jews from showing themselves in the king's court. We've designated certain cities where they may stay, and even in those cities, they can't just live anywhere. We've confined them to certain streets surrounded by a wall. We call the area a ghetto. Jews must wear yellow patches on their shoulders so that we can see them and know they are God's cursed children. And the prince tries to talk him his way out of it, gets in even more trouble, and then finally he just puts his foot down and he says, the Jew stays with me. Calmly, but pointedly, I will not put a patch of shame on the shoulder of a friend. Tell Narcissus, this Jew is the prince's man. I take him under my protection. I wanted to make sure to get that one in so people understand. Yehuda said the world that Simon painted for children was a kind of a tough world. Well, explicitly included in that, he wanted children to understand young about anti-Semitism and to understand Jewish pride and Yiddish pride as a resistance strategy to that. Let's skip my long road to Yiddish. There's a little bit of it in a video that's coming up. But I want to talk about translating. It's so much fun. And how do you translate names? The names in the story explicitly mean things. How do you translate a pun? There are other, particular challenges like that I particularly enjoyed. So quickly, the robber Hargim in Yiddish sounds violent, that name in and of itself. So I play, how do you come up with an English equivalent for that? Should I call him Mordim or something like that? Mordred, or something out of it sounded like out of Arthur's Knights, but I didn't know of a name you could call him Killer, but that's not really a name. Yeah. And Jordan put the kibosh on all of that and said, no, let's just use the names as they are. But one of the names I cooked up stayed. There was a Judge Tzodek, which may have made sense as a name in Yiddish. It was clear to children what Simon was trying to do. But Tzodek doesn't really quite sound right in English. And so I renamed him Judge Richter. And I thought that would give a nice, again, a name that meant something that had the right kind of feel to it. But other than that, we kept all the other names as they were. So much more to say, but let's keep it moving. This is supposed to be a little bit of a party, yes? And so you may have, a book release party. If we were in person, we'd be drinking wine. I'd be handing around crackers and cheese and grapes, and we would, I would sign books for each and every one of you so happily. But we can't do that over Zoom. Yeah. So how do we make it feel like a party? Well, I am delighted, honored to have Adah Hetko with us. She's an extraordinary musician. Once she starts playing, you'll know it's a party for sure. She's a singer, a songwriter, a researcher, and teacher of Yiddish music. In addition to a sweet voice, she has a talent for making songs come alive and sound like they are now, like they are contemporary songs of and for us. So I'll let her introduce what she's going to sing herself. Here is Adah Hetko.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me as part of this party. It's really, really a pleasure to be part of this moment. This is an extremely cool moment. This book is out and it's beautiful. I know that a lot of this story takes place in the forest, and so I'm going to play a song that is my musical setting of the first 11 lines of the Abraham Sutzkever poem Valdiks. And I just shared a link in the chat that will lead you to the lyrics if you want to follow along. But it describes all of these details of the beauty of being in a forest. So a großen Dank und Shkoyach, Allemen, congratulations, and here's my little piece of the party for you. In Trabens teutze Fall der Chäume von Gras und Blum, von Gras und Blum. Und wer es will kann sein, dass edele Spiel von Schwarz und Feier, von Bläu und Silber, rundherum auf der zerlegte schlafen Bäume, rundherum auf der schlafen Bäume, rundherum auf der zerlegte schlafen Bäume, rundherum auf der schlafen Bäume. Die Schottens wachsen in der Hecht, die Luft ist kiel, kiel und feucht. Wie trunken Wasser, die Schottens wachsen in der Hecht, die Luft ist kiel, kiel und feucht. Wie trunken Wasser. In drops of dew falls the essence of grass and flowers, and one who looks can see the gentle interplay of blue and silver, of black and fire, all around on the ground. Trees lay sleeping all around on the ground. Trees lay sleeping all around on the ground. Trees lay sleeping all around on the ground. Trees lay sleeping. The shadows grow up above. The air is cool, cool and soft, like dry water. The shadows grow up above. The air is cool, cool and soft, like dry water. Congratulations! So happy to be a part of this and so happy to celebrate with you today.
Okay. Sorry, I was muted there. Thank you so much, Adah. That was spectacular. Thank you. Okay, wow. Now, for a break from me talking, for a novena, we're going to have a video of me talking. So late last spring, when we were all newly vaccinated and the world was starting to look safer, I had a chance to sit down with Jordan Kutzik and with Jeff Prentke and talk about the Clever Little Tailor. Once I get talking, I talk, it's hard to get me to stop. In fact, I'd best just stop talking now, so there's enough time so you can all see the video of me talking. When the video is done, there'll be a special guest with more music, so don't go away. Here is the video. Hi, I'm David Forman, and I'm the translator who worked on the book, The Clever Little Tailor, a project very close to my heart. And I'm happy to be here to talk to you about it, to talk to you about my path to Yiddish language learning and translating, and about the book. My grandfather, Solomon Simon, who was the author of the book. Solomon Simon was the perfect grandfather. He was amazing. He was, first of all, delighted by my mere existence. When I walked into a room, he lit up. Second, he was a storyteller, and he loved children, and children loved him, and he had an immediate way of connecting with you when he told stories, either stories out of his books or stories about his childhood. I vividly remember being on his knee. He used to smoke cigars a lot, and he drank whiskey. And you might think that a little kid, a 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid, would not want to climb onto the lap of someone who stank of whiskey and cheap cigars. But in fact, that was the place to be, because he would regale you with stories. Everyone clearly had tremendous respect and admiration for him. To be a writer of Yiddish books was a very exalted thing. It was a very important thing. Oh, your grandfather's the writer, And I remember being little, wanting to be a writer when I grew up, because I knew that it was very impressive, my grandfather being a writer and having these books. And clearly it was impressive because he came to my summer camp and told stories to the children at my summer camp. He came to my public school and told stories to the children in my public school. And so he was a bit of a celebrity, a bit like having a celebrity grandfather. He died when I was 10. And that was a terrible thing in my life. That was really the first terrible thing in my life. And besides how loving a grandfather he was and how much I missed him, I felt this tremendous loss because he had written all these books that I couldn't read and I couldn't understand. At 10, I was already an avid reader, but I couldn't read his books because I didn't know Yiddish. And I swore to myself that someday I would learn Yiddish so that I could read his books. And it was in that time of grief that I sort of made that promise to myself. When I finally decided to get into Yiddish, it was at a moment in my life when I was, luckily or unluckily, unemployed, children grown up and gone. I had nothing else pulling on me. And so I was able to really dive in completely. I took a class at my Jewish community center 1 day a week. Can't really learn a language 1 day a week. So I also grabbed a friend from that class and we started reading my grandfather's work together with the dictionary. And I started translating. And my teacher helped me. I really learned Yiddish in the act of translating my grandfather's children's books, one after another. The third of those books that I got to was The Clever Little Tailor. And by that time, I was getting pretty good at it. I loved it. I worked hard on it. I had almost a complete draft of the translation. Of course, the question what I would do with it was always there. I dreamed someday I would have an English and Yiddish side-by-side book so that other people could do exactly what I was doing, which was to learn Yiddish from my grandfather's children's books. And out of the blue, that was when I got an email from Jordan Kutzik saying, I'm a publisher, I'm interested in publishing Yiddish children's books with English and Yiddish side by side, and we're really interested in your grandfather's work. Astonishing piece of timing. The process of translating itself, of course, is fascinating, challenging, mind-bending, delightful work. And particularly for a poet. A poet is used to davening over every word. A poet is used to turning the word over, turning it upside down. Is it really this word? Is it that word? Not just what the word means, but how it sounds, how it fits with the word next to it. What are the implications behind it? And learning a language is a lot like that. Translating is a lot like that. So as a poet who had worked in English, I immediately fell in love with that whole process of translating. I took a particular delight in translating the poems and songs in the book. One of the poems, for example, Oi gewalt a ganef, me hat doch mich geganvet, von dem Pfann heiße Fisch und dem Lamp von Tisch. 7 Hemder wie die Becher, 3 mit Lattes, 4 mit Lecher. Oi gewalt a ganef, me hat doch mich geganvet. You know, it starts out, oi gewalt, a thief has cleaned me out, has stolen everything from me. You know, the fish from the pan. Well, but how do you translate this, right? Oi gewalt, I tried, oh my, a thief has cleaned me out. No, that's not it. Help, help, a thief has cleaned me out, right? That's oi gewalt is a cry for help. That didn't work. Only after I tried everything else and finally came back to where I started, which was oi gewalt, a thief has cleaned me out. The lamp off the table and the fish from the pot. 7 shirts just like the gold cup, 4 with holes and 3 patched up. Oi gewalt, a thief has cleaned me out. Oi gewalt a ganef, oi gewalt a ganef. So later, to my astonishment, I found an audio clip of my grandfather singing this song. He had been in a project studying the different dialects of people's Yiddish who came from different places in Europe. And when the interviewer asked him about a thief, he started just spontaneously singing a snip from this song, which had been in his book.
Die sind wat ich gesagt, ist a gneve, ja gneve.
A gneve.
They stole everything.
Wacht, I borrowed their money. 7 Hemder wie die Becher, 3 mit Lattes, 4 mit Lecher. Und dieser Kanef, und dieser Kanef, und hat gegangen mit Autos. Wie was again? Hat gegangen.
I've gotten to know my grandfather better by translating his work, and that's amazing. I loved him, but I loved him the way a child loves a grandfather, and I didn't really know him the way an adult can know another adult. And I feel a deep affinity for him, and I've gotten to know him a lot better over the time of reading his work and translating his work. In writing for children and in translating, I've learned to be a better writer, and that sort of brings my Yiddish learner self together with my poet self, and I feel like they work very well together. You know, when I promised myself as a 10-year-old, someday I will learn Yiddish so I can read my grandfather's books, it didn't occur to me to dream someday I will learn Yiddish so that I can help other people read my grandfather's books. That's even better. There we go. I did it again. Okay. So clearly a good video editor can make anyone look good. But I do think I probably have to grow that one back. Okay. I'm still gobsmacked that I got to hear a recording of my grandfather's voice 50 years after, just about 50 years after he died. It's amazing. Okay, back to the book. So in that little Ganevenlied, the little robber ballad shows Schneiderl's transformation. Earlier on, he was catching thieves, and now he's actually become a thief in order to defeat the evil archbishop, help his friend, and ease the lot of England's Jews. So my understanding is our next guest will pick it up from there. Mikhl Yashinsky is an actor, an opera director, a teacher, a singer, and on and on. Credits include acting in the Folk Venus Broadway production of Fiddler auf den Dach, co-authorship of the Yiddish Book Center's new textbook, Ingeweb, and that's just to name 2. And now here is Mikhl Yashinsky.
Hello, everyone. Wonderful to be with you all. Just to correct one thing, the name of the new textbook is In Einem.
Oh.
Ingeveb is a wonderful Yiddish journal of Yiddish studies in English, but Ingeveb is In Einem is our new Yiddish textbook. But here I'm here today to talk about the wonderful book Das kluge Schneiderl. So I am going to begin by sharing that song that we just heard. Shloime Simon doing, and this wonderful song about a theft, a ganeve, as translated by David Forman. So I'll play again the author singing this original snatch of song, and then I'll do my own version of it. Then we'll hear something else. Oi gewalta ganef, me hat doch mich beganwit, von der Fahn heiße Fisch und dem Lamm von Tisch. 7 Hemder wie die Becher, 3 mit Lattes, 4 mit Lecher. Oi gewalta ganef, 7 Hemder wie die Becher, 3 mit Lattes, 4 mit Lecher. Oi gewalta ganef, me hat doch mich beganwit. A klein liedele. The bulk of what I'm going to do for you is a shtickle badkhones. Badkhones is when a traditional sort of wedding jester stands up at a wedding and entertains the crowd with rhymed couplets that the badchen has written himself and performs for everyone assembled to honor the occasion. So I thought this occasion, though not a wedding, definitely deserves some rhymed couplets to honor it. And my role in Fiddler auf den Dach was actually to perform as the badchen at the wedding of Mikhl Yashinsky. So I know a bit about this, and I've written my own couplets to mark this occasion and this wonderful book. So here they are. Nope. Good. Moi Reiber boy sei, Enthusiasten und Freund. Mir sennen sich gekommen zu freien Heint, mit na Reuskum von a Buch, a wunderbares, a Bichl, a Bunz, nor nit kein Fars, mit a bissel Tragödie und a bissel Komödie, und a hübsch bissel Spassiker wie an Enzyklopädie. Der Badchen will begrüßen jeden einzigen Maimen, in dem klugen Komiker von Kalinkowitsch, Reb Shloime Simon, was witzelt wegen die Venturis von dem klugen Schneiderl, verenglischt von dem Einekel, was kennt doch sein Teierer. Der Offerteitscher David Forman und Herr Verleger Kutzik Jordan, 2 lustige Literaten, zu kaufen sehr, Legende kann gar nicht schatten. Yehuda Bloom, a Kamelie zwischen Künstlers, hat gemacht die Illustraties mit Formans Werther und Simons, als a prächtige Kombinatie. Wie Blumen an Plecken, Blumsbilder die Säudes, was kommen vor in Formans scharfe Avoides, a Broche Vergeudels und euch Verboyes, Äußeres Verlehners von allerlei Deures. Kinder-Loshn heißt die Serie, soll sie nicht sein, kein Mysterie, soll jeder Liebhaber von jüdischen Wort kommen und gefunden in dem Bichl an Ort, wo literarisch zu verbringen, zwischen 2 Tovlen a Gan Eden. Jung, alt, lehnt beide, sie auf Jiddisch, sie auf Englisch, weil gar nicht ist nicht ähnlich zu die Frieden von unser heintigen Melech. Reb Berl auf Jiddisch, nor es ist nicht kein Jiddisch, als keiner ruft ihm mit Namen je, is lo mir alle auf der heimischer Zeremonie, besingen unser Held, ein Mensch von Flamm und Feierl, ist Gäufer die Ganovim, unser heißbeliebt Schneiderl, und die Schäfers von sein Bichl, mit die warmste Wünschen, Mikhl.
Bravo. Bravo, Mikhl. Wow, thank you so much. Everyone who has wine and cheese of your own, have some wine and cheese. Have some wine if you have wine. Cool. It's beyond, I'm just so happy and so grateful to everyone. So again, there were the addresses to buy the book. A very quick round of thank yous. Thank you to all three of Solomon Simon's children. Unfortunately, two no longer with us. Judy Block, who loved children with every fiber of her being. David Simon, who followed in his father's intellectual tradition. And Miriam Forman, my mother, who is a student of Yiddish with me. Together, we've had many, many happy hours of verbringen mit Yiddish und Yiddishkeit. So much more. Shuli Elisheva, who first suggested this book, Yankel Peretz Bloom, Yehuda Bloom's brother, who not only did some of the behind-the-scenes work with a little bit of the Yiddish, but also is Schneiderl, that is, he's the model for the illustrations. The Naborsky family, especially Dina, who did the word processing, Eliezer, who smoothed over some of the old inconsistencies in the original manuscript. But we are close to time, and I really wanted there to be a few minutes at the end for questions and answers. So if you like, you can put a question in the chat window. We'll take, I know we're right at 5. We're going to take a few more minutes, and those of us who can stay, thank you so much. Those who can't, thank you so much for coming. But those who can stay just another few minutes. And if you put a question in the chat window, Jordan will scoop it up for me, and we can do our best to answer. So again, mazel tov to everyone on the team, and thank you so much to everyone who helped make the party. And yeah, are there any questions that people have? I will give you a minute to chat, type them into chat, and let's see what we got. No, otherwise, Jordan, you can ask me something while we wait for the next question to appear.
So we have a couple of questions. So Jay Bordage asks, what's your next translation?
I have more of Simon's work translated, and I will keep working on that. But it's a funny thing. This is early on in this activity for me, and I don't want people to think of me only as Simon's grandson and translator. So I love translating poetry. I am also working a little bit on that. But the real answer is I'm not sure. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I have a lot of time opening up soon, and so I'll keep you informed. I'll let you know.
Okay, so Paul Olson asks, could you give us an example of the puns you said were a challenge to translate?
There's one in particular. The prince waylays Schneiderl, and they immediately start bantering back and forth about who was scared and who wasn't scared and so on. And while they're bantering, the prince comments to Schneiderl as that you never, where is it? You don't leave me schuldig vor ein Entfer. Of Yiddish, the Yiddish word schuldig means guilty, but it also means in debt. And so, in effect, he was saying, you never leave me wanting for an answer. Yeah. And Schneiderl answers that an honest man is never schuldig, and so doesn't owe anyone anything. And so he's playing on whether he's guilty or innocent, and it makes absolutely no sense in English. And so what I needed to do was to come up with something in English which expressed Schneiderl's chutzpah, because in fact what's going on is that the prince with his big black horses has waylaid this tiny little guy on the road, and is saying, as they've got weapons, and Schneiderl immediately starts giving him back and forth. And so I needed some kind of joke. So the prince in English says to Schneiderl, you have an answer to suit everything, don't you? And Schneiderl says, well, I'm a tailor. So a little wordplay on the word suit, and it just had that same function of, just showing that he was ready to banter, he was ready to give back as good as he got.
Okay, so we have one more question from Fiona Chomness. If it's not too personal, were there moments in translating that made you think about reading, telling stories to your own children? In what other ways, other than mentioning cars, did you lean into a type of translation that centers the storytelling listening experience?
Okay, so I'm thinking about telling these stories to my children in a way that centers the storytelling listening experience and trying to get that into the writing. First of all, my children are now grown, so I don't really get to read my translation to my children. I will read it to children, but that's going to have to wait a bit. I think Simon's own text has those storytelling elements in it, in some of the repetitions. And so in some ways, as long as I was not in a hurry to try to sort of make an efficient translation, but that I allowed it to spin out the way that he had, I just followed his lead. And my hope is that it reads out loud well. I noticed myself even now tweaking a tiny bit as I read out loud in this event. And I sure hope that parents do that they feel free to do that. It's really okay to read the story slightly differently every time. And, I think that's what good readers do as well as good storytellers. So I guess we got to turn it back over to you, Jordan, and wrap it up. So I'll say my last thank you. And yeah, this was a pleasure to have all of you here.
Well, I can't thank everyone enough. There are a couple of people we didn't get to thank who played an important role in the book. Yankel Salant did an incredible job with the layout, with the book design, with the gallery of letters in the back, many other aspects. Boris Sandler, Arla Vishwanath, and Yankel Peretz Bloom all gave phenomenal advice. And especially in addition to Eliezer Naborsky, who did a fantastic job helping us make kind of a bridge between standard Yiddish and Simon's more Lithuanian Yiddish dialogue and taking the best elements, leaving other elements. Rachel Field, my wife, did a great job with the English editing. And of course, we need to thank the entertainment today. Adah for her wonderful and fascinating translation and adaptation of Sutzkever's work. Mikhl Yashinsky, that is the best badkhones for a children's book release I think has ever happened in history. Don't know if that's true, but I'm going to stick with it. And of course, to David for all of this, for learning Yiddish all these years later, for working to get this book to come out, for working with me, and for many other projects related to Solomon Simon and broader with Jewish cultural memory. And of course, I'd be remorse not to thank Judith Bro, who's been our grant writer, has helped with long before this project with all sorts of things with Yugntruf over the last 12 or 13 years. Mina Vishwanath, who and Uncle Parrots Bloom, who have steered this organization with me for a few years. We don't want it to become Mittel Elterruf, but we've got a few more years to do it, I think. And to all of you who donated, who supported, who gave good wishes, and who will enjoy the book in the years to come. Thanks for everything. Großen Dank, großen Shikoyach.
Und Jordan Kutzik, herzlichen Dank. Ja, seid alle gesund und stark. We'll do this again, a version of this entirely in Yiddish sometime soon. Thanks, everyone.